Hello, Dr. Anthony Youn, America's Holistic Plastic Surgeon here. Well, you're used to me doing videos giving you advice on cosmetic treatments and different ways to look and feel your best. Well, today I'm going to do something a little bit different, and I'm going to tell you a story that means a lot to me, and I hope that you really enjoy hearing. So the story is from my book, Playing God, and it's all about a patient of mine who really changed how I look at myself, how I look at operating. So this is a story about a woman who came in to see me. She was in her late 50s, early 60s, and she had had a tummy tuck in the past. She was morbidly obese. She had lost some weight and went to a different doctor for a tummy tuck surgery. Well, she had a ton of medical issues. She had diabetes. She'd had a previous history of a heart attack with a placement of a stent. She was on blood thinners. She was on multiple psychiatric medications. She had kidney problems. She really, you name it, she had it. And she really was not a good candidate for surgery. So she came in to see me and she said, Dr. Youn, 15 other plastic surgeons have turned me down. You are my last hope. Will you please help me? So I said, hey, look, let's start by having you tell me your story. And she said, well, Dr. Youn, I lost this weight and I went to see a plastic surgeon and I was so excited to get rid of all this extra skin of my tummy. So I went to surgery and this doctor performed a tummy tuck on me and then everything fell apart. And so I said, well, what do you mean everything fell apart? And she said, I developed a horrible infection of my tummy. My skin turned black and it was some type of a flesh-eating infection that I developed. And she said I was in the hospital for months and I developed this horrible scarring. I went back to surgery multiple times where I had skin grafts placed and I had these vac sponges where they put these black sponges in the massive wounds in my tummy and hooked those up to vacuum suctions. And she said it was months before it finally healed. And when it did heal, it was this kind of socked in, scarred up mess. And she came into my office hobbling on a cane. And she said, I'm in so much pain, Dr. Youn, that I can barely walk. My husband won't even look at me. I feel terrible about how I look. And she said, you know, the worst part of it is that I've got this granddaughter that I haven't played with in so long. And she said, all I ask for you, please, Dr. Youn, is if you could take the pain of my tummy away, treat my tummy, and help me to play with my granddaughter again. So I looked at all of her medical history, and as a physician, that's the first thing that I do. You know, whenever I see new patients, the first thing is we go over their medical history. We see what medications are on. She was on a list of medications like this long. She had all these medical issues, and as a surgeon, any doctor would look at her and what's going on with all the medications. She was at a high, if I brought her to surgery, she'd be at a high risk of having a heart attack, of dying on the table, of developing blood clots, bleeding, all these complications. And when you looked at it objectively, she was not a candidate for an elective surgery. She just wasn't. The risks were just too high. And so she said, Dr. Youn, and she started crying, and she said, 15 other plastic surgeons turned me down. And she said, my life, I feel like, is over. And all I really want to do, like I said, is to hold my granddaughter again. Can you please help me? So normally, once again, we'd look at this type of thing, and as a doctor, you'd say, no, this is not, we can't do it. No matter how much, you know, she tugs at your heartstrings, you can't do it. But it was weird. In this situation, I felt a sense of peace. And I felt that I was called to help her. And, you know, you can call it what you will. You know, I know my followers have all different spiritual and religious backgrounds and beliefs. But really what it came down to is I developed this peace that this was the thing that I had to do. It was the right thing to do. And I felt that God was telling me, as weird as this may sound, that she was brought in and I was called on to help this woman. So I told her, no promises. I said, you have a higher risk, and I list all these complications, you know, of bleeding, of blood clots, of having a heart attack, all these issues if we go to surgery. Do you really, really want to do this? And she said, yes, you're my last hope. Everybody else has turned me down, please. And so I said, yes, let's do it. And so fast forward a few weeks, and the night before her surgery, I go to bed that night, my wife is asleep beside me, and I pray for her. You know, before surgery, every night before surgery, I typically go over my charts for the next day's operation so that I know that I'm ready for that operation the next day. I know, because every patient's just a little bit different, you know, and even if it's something that, you know, I do 100 times a year, like breast enhancement or a breast reduction or a tummy tuck, every patient has their own individual, you know, differences that as a surgeon, I need to know about that. And I need to make sure that when I'm in the OR, I'm absolutely ready for their operation. So the night before, I go over her information and I'm reminded, you know, this is the woman, you know, that is such a high risk. And so I go to bed that night and I pray for her, and I pray for God to help me help her. And that whatever, you know, whatever you do, you know, please hear my prayer and just help her get through this operation. So the next day I bring her to the operating room, and you know, she really had basically her tummy, about half of it was missing. Half her abdominal wall was missing, and the skin had basically died off. There were areas where she had had skin grafts placed, other areas where it was just scarred in tissue. And so what I did was I was able to cut all of that tissue out and move the normal tissue that was above all of that down. And luckily, the doctor wasn't as aggressive as maybe some doctors would have been, and left me with some skin there to work with. So the surgery took about 3 hours. I pulled all the skin down and essentially did what would be a pretty typical, we called a paniculectomy on her. And we kept her overnight in the hospital. We kept her off her blood thinners for a short period of time. Then we put her back on them, watching her very, very closely for bleeding and stuff. And she did great. Everything went really well. So she came back to see me at about 6 weeks after surgery. And she walks into my office, no cane, okay? Walks into my office, upright, huge smile on her face, bringing a carrot cake with her. And I'll tell you, one of my rules, and most of my patients don't know this, but one of my rules is not to eat food made by other people that are brought into the office, because I have no idea what their kitchen is like, and I'm just a little bit, I don't know, anal retentive that way. So she walks into the office with her carrot cake and says, "Dr. Youn, I know that my insurance rejected your claim," which they did. They rejected it, saying that it was cosmetic and refused to pay me. And she said, "I don't have any money to pay you for the surgery, but will you please accept this carrot cake as full payment for my operation?" And of course, I said yes. And she said, "Well, here, have a slice." And I said, "Oh, I'll have a little of that later." And she said, "You know what, Dr. Youn, I need to tell you something." And I said, "Well, what is that, Ruth?" And she said, "Dr. Youn, yesterday was the first time in almost 2 years where I actually held my granddaughter in my lap and I played with her." And she said, "I want to thank you for getting me to the place that I really wanted to be." And she said, "Why did you do it?" And so I asked her, I said, "Well, what do you mean? What are you asking? Like, what do you mean, why did you do it?" And she said, "Why did you take a chance on me when so many other people wouldn't?" And I told her, I said, "You know what? It's because I felt called that this was the right thing to do." And you know what? The entire time when I was in the operating room, the surgery went so smoothly, and I knew that it wasn't just me and my staff and my assistants there. There was somebody else there too, you know. There was somebody else watching over us, and somebody helping us to get to the point where we are now and where we got to with her. And she said something after that. She said, "You know, Dr. Youn, you know, I've seen 15 other doctors, they've turned me down." And she said, "There are all these doctors out there that think they're high and mighty, that they act like they're playing God." And that's where the title of my book came from, this idea. And she said, "Not you." And she said, why is it that that's not how you believe, that what you believe, that you're not the one that's playing God, you're not that type of surgeon?" And I told her honestly, I said, "You know what? I don't play God. I need God to help me, you know, and I don't think that I could have gotten through your operation without God helping me through it." And so I did, after that, take a slice of her cake, and it was delicious. So I just wanted to share, this was one of the stories from my new book, Playing God, The Evolution of a Modern Surgeon. It comes out on September 17th. We've got all these gifts if you do decide to pre-order it, or if you see this video after it's released. We have gifts on my website, dryoun.com, to give you if you do buy the book. And I hope you do, because I'm really, really proud of it. It was 5 years of writing, and I think you're really going to enjoy these stories and what it truly takes to become a modern holistic surgeon in today's wild west of medicine. So that's my story, and I've got some more stories to come here. So take a peek if you're watching this video after it's published, and hit this button right down here.